Okay, hello everyone and welcome to session 10, panel A, entitled TV Pets and Half Human Monsters, though I think it's only going to be on TV Pets this time. We have two presenters today with us, so I'm going to introduce each of you before you start speaking. Just remember that we are going to record the session. We are already recording the session, so if you want to ask something at the end of the Q&A session, but you don't want to turn on your camera, that's not a problem. You can either raise your hands to ask a question or just type it into on the chat and I will read it aloud. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is Karli Brittz from the University of Pretoria. Her paper is entitled Beyond the Non-Human, Exploring a Spirited Companion Species in Netflix Dogs. Okay, Karli, I don't know if you have a presentation to share.
Yes, I'm going to share it now.
Perfect.
Okay, you can see it?
Yes.
Cool. All right.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, so the floor is yours, Karli.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, right. So in the spirit of this conference, where we've been exploring how to tell animal stories, I feel somewhat compelled to start off by introducing my own companion species. This is Cooper, an energy-packed 2-year-old Labrador, and Cody, a gentle giant Rhodesian Ridgeback. And prompted by my relationship with Cody and Cooper, I've explored the kinship between the human and the non-human, specifically human and dog, for the past few years. I should state from the start that I am fundamentally rooted in the idea that Cooper, Cody, and I are irreducible subjective beings, being with each other in various ways in our contemporary society. Through my research, I have tried to make sense of different ways of being with animals and telling of animal tales, specifically from a digital culture and media point of view. In short, my field of interest is where, as Donna Haraway would say, human, dog, and technology meet. And it's at this intersection that we've already seen throughout the conference that there are so many strands of literature and worldviews that we can use to guide us in making sense of animal and human relations and their representations on screen. However, in this paper, I want to explore another strand of literature that is not considered too often in contemporary discourse of animal representation. The human-non-human relation as transcendental, soulful, or then if you are so inclined, spiritual. My intention is to bring the conversation regarding otherworldly qualities of companion species into the proverbial light. My aim is not to debate the feasibility of such a belief. Rather, I aim to simply entertain an alternate way of thinking of animal beings beyond anthropocentrism and non-humanism, specifically in relation to popular culture. I discuss the transcendent as an additional layer of meaning and way of looking at animals, in particular dogs. And in doing so, I consider how this layer is imagined in popular culture and what implications it can have on our being with animals. Discussions of human-non-human relations often show a glimmer of spiritual, celestial, soulful, and transcendental understanding. Although these terms differ in part, they are interchangeable in that they all convey the notion of being outside of or extending beyond the human world, including the earthly, physical, and material world, the corporeal human body, or the human mind. Therefore, by using these terms, I imply a general thinking of human-animal relation extending beyond immanence and the fleshy material touch of Donna Haraway's companion species into an otherworldly existence. Thinking of animals through a transcending lens is not a new phenomenon. John Berger explains that beyond human exceptionalism, animals were often thought of as mysterious creatures that belonged both to the human world and the immortal realm. That is to say, they have been subjected to the spiritual practices of both worship and sacrifice. After all, the word animal originates from the Latin word anima, meaning life or breath. And although this is commonly associated with biological life, anima also refers to having soul or spirit. Consider, for example, Aristotle's De Anima or On the Soul. In particular, the spiritual sense of the animal is expressed in the human-dog relationship. In On God and Dogs, theologian Stephen Webb highlights the long-standing perspective that the bond between human and dog is often imagined as sacred, a belief that is ironically even more so emphasized by the inverse of the word dog, that is God. These so-called creation myths are then often expressed in popular culture, especially in cartoons and comics, as you can see on the screen. More recently, though, popular American films have also imagined the dog as existing in the immanent world with a transcendent purpose. A Dog's Purpose and the Art of Racing in the Rain, for instance, explores the possibility of canine reincarnation and the devotion, loyalty, and unconditional love that exists between man and dog. Notably, these examples have easily been picked apart for their anthropomorphism and projection of openly human theological principles onto animal beings. Popular culture that imagines the dog beyond the human world is therefore increasingly complex, since by its very nature, the transcendent cannot be defined or pinpointed. In other words, any on-screen depiction of spirited animals must tread lightly in trying to explain and not enforce the inexplicable. And yet I argue that there are some unique examples that manage to achieve this impossibility. In 2018, Netflix released a documentary series simply entitled Dogs, which profiles people and their pooches across the globe. As the series itself describes, the show takes viewers on an inspirational journey that explores the remarkable, perhaps even magical qualities that have given the animals a special place in most people's hearts. Perhaps through the medium of documentary filmmaking depicting real-world human-dog narratives, it becomes more viable or credible to imagine otherworldly animal meeting spaces. Notably, the series never enforces a particular theological understanding onto its viewers. There is no narrator guiding or constructing meaning, and no human thought placed in the animal's mind. Instead, we are simply taken on a journey through the lives of humans and their animal companions, where, as I will show, the otherworldly bond shines through. But before delving deeper into dogs, I do want to momentarily consider instances where theorists specifically outline the human-animal relation as situated within the so-called in-between. In an essay entitled Animal Compassion, French philosopher Luce Irigaray considers animals beyond the human and physical universe through autobiographical stories. She asserts that the only way she can speak about the animal is by narrating what she observes from a human horizon, with the awareness that the animal remains inaccessible to her. In telling stories of animal encounters, Irigaray wonders if animals are not otherworldly messengers that provide a mystical sense of comfort, aid, or healing. Note that for Irigaray, animals are not at service for human need, but rather because of their transcendental nature and their inaccessibility, they are able to offer additional meaning to human life and simultaneously help us interrogate the human condition. Put differently though, still in Irigaray's terms, animals point us towards both the sensible and the transcendent. Importantly, Irigaray's animal philosophy also suggests acting compassionately and gently to animals and other humans. It implies a sense of responsibility, respect, and space between two irreducible subjects. Through this sacred lens, Irigaray provides us with a possible ethics of animal treatment that requires compassionate interactions, where animals are not forced into the human world, but rather they are left to be, while humans remain open and respectful to the messages they deliver when we do encounter them. And then another notable discussion in contemporary multi-species discourse and popular culture is the phenomena of trans-species encounters. Here, species boundaries become blurred as one species seemingly transcends to another's cognitive or physical experience of the world. For example, in recent films, Wolf, the Fantastic Beasts and Harry Potter franchise, and even in Disney and Pixar's Soul and Turning Red, human enters the animal's gaze and experiences the world as that animal or vice versa. Most prominently introduced by ethnographer Eduardo Kahn, trans-species is a controversial phenomenon because it is fundamentally abject and its feasibility is so widely contradicted. Interestingly, though, Kahn argues that trans-species is a way of learning to think as others or with the images of others, which allows us to live well with them. Although I am hesitant to apply such an enchanted and disembodied theory to all animal-human relations, this theory does suggest the possibility for compassionate treatment of animals through a transcendental lens. More importantly, Kahn suggests the idea of thinking with images or through imagery, highlighting the importance of popular culture and media depictions of animals. Could popular culture be reconceptualized as a transference portal to think through the world of the animal? Following Kahn, I argue that Netflix's Dogs allows the viewer to transcend their own world onto the screen to experience the world of human-dog companionship. Keeping with Irigaray and Kahn, Dogs narrates and thinks through visual human stories of companion species, and in doing so subtly signifies the possible otherworldly qualities of human-dog relations. A spiritual layer is perhaps already introduced through the theme song of the series. The very first lines remind of a worship song. Spirit comes to me free of world. With this, the series sets the scene for real-life narrations of humans and their dogs, while maintaining an opening for the idea that these relations might transcend the human self and be free of its world. Throughout the various dog stories, the Irigarayan idea of animal as comforting aid features prominently. In the first episode, the viewer meets a young girl, Corinne, who suffers from epilepsy. The episode shows the family's journey to apply for and get a service dog, Rory, who can help detect her seizures. When the family finally finds out that they are getting a service dog, the moment is celebrated as a miracle as she runs through the neighborhood to show her friends her new dog. We also see Corinne experiencing a seizure during which Rory appears by her side, licking and touching her and helping her break out of her upset state. Thus, Rory aids Corinne and her family to transcend and overcome her physical limitations and bodily inabilities. This trope of the dog as aid or guide features throughout the series, as we, for instance, also meet Ice, a Labrador who helps his owner, Alessandro, fish, an American veteran returning from Iraq, finding her feet back in society by fostering a puppy, and an astronaut grieving his deceased crew with the companionship of his two dogs, who, in his own words, help him heal through tragedy. Another transcendental theme prominent throughout the series is the idea of traversing borders. For instance, the viewer is taken on an emotional journey with a Syrian refugee who attempts to smuggle his dog Zeus out of Damascus to Germany. Emphasized by his divine name, Zeus's courageous rescue mission extends beyond physical borders, where the love between human and dog is seemingly sensible, transcendental. Finally, spoiler, when Zeus is reunited with his owner, the magical moment transcends as other people are also seen filming the reunion on their phones. That is to say, the documentary shows how the companionship traverses and manifests unconditional love. Similarly, in Second Chances, we meet an animal advocate, Anna, who drives across America to New York City to help animals be adopted. In these episodes, I argue that both human and dog can be seen as otherworldly aids, since the humans help the dogs to meet or reunite with owners, and in turn, the dogs help those traveling with them towards freedom and a purpose in their life. Freedom then continues as a theme throughout Dogs, as we are also shown Irigaray's notion that humans should allow animals to be. For example, in the third installment, Ice on the Water, Alessandro stresses that he lets Ice be, and he gives him the freedom to roam about his town. In other words, we can argue that the relationship is one of trust and freedom, where both human and dog lets the other species go about their doings while caring for the other. In another episode, the viewer is introduced to a free-range shelter for dogs in Costa Rica, where dogs are cared for but left on their own to roam free. Similarly, in Space for Dogs, astronaut Leland Malvin road trips through America with his two Ridgebacks to embark on a 14,000-foot hike. And he is extremely conscious of the dog's abilities, and he does not force them to hike with him. When they appear tired, he allows them the freedom to stop, relax, or even head back. Thus, these episodes teach a similar ethics of animal relations as Irigere, where dogs are not forced into the human world, but left to exist as their own beings alongside their human counterparts. Nonetheless, there are still some episodes in dogs that showcase anthropomorphism. But notably, even in these cases, the series manages to transcend human exceptionalism and showcase another layer of meaning to the anthropomorphic human-animal relation. In the narrative following Butler's university mascot, Bulldog Blue, we learn that besides being a mascot, he is also everybody's dog, left to his own freedom, and his guides his handler through a journey of responsibility and retirement, as well as surgery. Moreover, in Scissors Down, an interesting soulfulness is revealed, and an inner peace is described that comes with the art of dog grooming. The groomers describe how the act of grooming for them is a meeting point between the self and the dog that allows for a soulful, transcendental encounter. Okay. And then interestingly, in some scenes and narratives, the viewer encounters various religious signifiers. For instance, following Ice through San Giovanni, Italy, he greets the town priest outside of the church. He visits a graveyard where we see a close-up of the Virgin Mary, and the sound of church bells linger in the background of the entire episode. The religious imagery underscores the relation between Alessandro and Ice. Alessandro explains that Ice reminds him of the presence of his father who passed away prematurely. The communication and bond between Ice and Alessandro mimics the trans-species communication that Khan speaks of. They communicate with such ease that it almost seems as if they relate in an enchanting manner. And then the final episode of the 2 seasons follows a priest on a mission to find stray dogs a home. The viewer watches as the priest somewhat humorously blesses the dogs in church and explains to the congregation that loving animals is a direct bond with the spiritual realm. Here, the sacred bond between human and dog that has been subtly depicted throughout the series suddenly becomes clearly visible. And yet, because of the documentary medium, it does not seem forced. The viewer is simply asked to possibly consider that an additional layer of meaning can exist in thinking of our companion species. Finally, what critics, as well as the show's creators themselves, point out is that the entire dog series not only teaches us about dogs as companions, but also, as Irigere indicates, teaches us about being human. Kirkland argues that dogs tells a human story through a non-human narrative, asserting that even in these soulful accounts of dogs, our companion species become messengers about our own human lives. Perhaps in our telling of dog stories, multi-species stories, and non-human stories, we should not forget the value of the human story in teaching us about being with animals. In addition, I suggest that what we also learn from dogs is perhaps then the possibility of thinking about non-human relations in otherworldly liminal realms where animals can be separate, irreducible subjects that humans may never fully know, but also have a great fortune to encounter. This in turn can result in a free and caring friendship. As Kirkland explains, and if you are really paying attention, truly listening to the stories that are being told, some of that unconditional love may rub off on you too. Dogs has pointed me towards an additional manner of telling human animal stories and thinking of my relation with Cody and Cooper. One where the visual image can act as a medium to think with and transcend us into the animal world. One where entertaining the idea of animals as sensely transcendent allows for caring and kind kinship while maintaining imperishable boundaries. And one where simple human tales about dogs that do not enforce ideas, but rather subtly depict, transcends me beyond my earthly existence. Or perhaps say differently, by this Twitter user in 2021, I think Dogs on Netflix is potentially the most wholesome content that exists. It's the series we should send to the aliens to show that we are nice beings.
Great, thank you, Karli. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. Great, so we go to our next speaker, Borbála László, apologies for any mispronunciation, from the University of Debrecen. The paper is entitled Finding the Real Anka, a critical analysis of the dog character in Gilmore Girls. So the floor is yours. Borbála, whenever you are ready, if you have presentation to share.
Yeah, I do. Just one moment. Okay. Could you please confirm if you see my presentation?
Yes, it's over
Okay.
there. Perfect.
Great. And by the way, you can call me Bori. That's so much easier. So, right. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Bori, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Debrecen, Hungary. And I've been studying dog representations in fiction, films, and documentaries. But today I'm going to talk about a TV show, Gilmore Girls, which might be familiar to some of you, and its canine star, Anka. So let me start in a kind of in medias res way. So what or whom do we see when we are watching dogs on the screen? Are they humans in furry bodies or actual dogs? In this presentation, I will presume that the answer is both and neither. Because on the one hand, and as Adrian McLean puts it, dogs in cinema are always called to the set, as it were, to signify as projections and realizations of an intention. The intention of filmmakers, audiences, as well as critics. On the other hand, dogs on the screen are also actual creatures that refuse to be contained within our constructions. As Jonathan Burt has famously argued, animals in cinema exceed their symbolic associations, so they are always posited on the verge between the fictitious and the real. Similarly, Annette Pick asserts that despite their excessive use as mirrors of human concerns and as repositories of human attributes, the appearance of animals in moving images is also always concrete. Inspired by Brittz and Pick's arguments, I examined how individual films featuring dogs hybridize representation and reality. That is, to what extent each film creates fictional constructions out of dogs, while they might also portray them as actual creatures, for example, by taking into consideration or even highlighting their own subjective realities. As I mentioned, although I primarily study fiction films and documentaries, during the summer, I rewatched some Gilmore Girls episodes, and I became curious whether this kind of hybridization of the constructed and the creatural dog might also be detected in TV shows, and if so, to what extent. Criticism concerned with television has been mostly preoccupied with how this medium uses animals as transparent images through which human notions and sentiments are projected, as well as props merely used for entertainment purposes. So the consensus seems to be that TV shows tend to obliterate the actual dogs by transforming them into fictional constructs. Hence the title of Brett Mill's book, Animals on Television, The Cultural Making of the Non-Human, sorry. In this book, Mills argues that, I quote, television routinely fails to encompass the totality of the animal experience in its depictions, therefore rendering the actual animal absent. And in this way also inscribing the animals as subordinate elements in an anthropocentric narrative and visual representation. He essentially argues that representations of animals on television reinstate human-animal relationships which are hierarchical, objectifying, and species. And what is interesting, and actually it is not by chance, that Mill's most kind of common examples are dog characters from TV shows, because as a number of scholars have pointed out, due to their proximity to humans, their familiarity, the range of breeds, as well as the variety of purposes to which they are put by humans, the visual representations of dogs have been used for all kinds of different purposes, mainly for saying something about humans and evoking certain emotions through their images. So I became curious whether TV shows indeed portray dogs merely or predominantly in this reductive and objectifying manner, or can they also represent them as dogs, as individual creatures with their own subjective features and experiences. And the case study that I'm going to talk about is that of Olenka in Gilmore Girls, the popular comedy drama series made by Amy Sherman-Palladino and Daniel Palladino. The show portrays the relationship of single mother Lorelai and her daughter Rory, who live in fictional Stars Hollow, Connecticut. The show has been analyzed actually from the perspective of gender, generational, class, ethnic, and national identity, and as a representation of contemporary American culture and society. Interestingly, the canine star of the show, Olenka, has never garnered critical attention. Lorelai adopts the dog after falling out with Rory over her decision to take time off Yale, which the mother doesn't approve of. And this leads to their prolonged estrangement, which basically runs through season 6. And during this period, Lorelai adopts Olenka, and she treats him as a substitute child in many ways. However, once mother and daughter reconcile, the dog's on-screen presence is seriously reduced, implying that he's a substitute not only within the narrative, but also used as such by the show. Moreover, after Lorelai and Rory make up, Olenka only appears as a cute prop, if at all. So this suggests that the real dog is absent from the show. In the following case study, I examined the aspects through which the series transforms the dog into a fictional construct, while I'm also trying to find the real Olenka. The first thing that I'm going to, or I would like to talk about is the adoption scene. Not long after Rory moves to her grandparents and leaves Lorelai alone, there is an adoption event at Stars Hollow's main square. And all the animals on display seem to be indifferent towards Lorelai, except for a shaggy-looking dog, who is a Polish lowland sheepdog. He's also played, the character is played by a Polish lowland sheepdog named Sparky. But in the show, he's named after the legendary singer Olenka, who became famous in the 1950s. So what is interesting is that from the moment of bringing Olenka to the show, he's made into something more than he is, basically a pop cultural reference in the form of a cute dog, which is in itself a cultural cliche frequently used in cinema. "You are cute, shaggy cute," says Lorelai to Olenka. She also concludes that the dog seems very happy to see her. So from the first moment she meets the dog, Lorelai starts projecting her feelings and ideas on the dog. For a moment, however, it seems that she will not adopt the dog because she's interrupted by another character, Miss Patty, who informs the animal shelter workers about Lorelai's history with animals. It is implied that she has killed all of her previous pets, a hamster, a rabbit, and a turtle. Although these are not the same category as the dog, says Lorelai, implying that dogs occupy basically a higher position in the American cultural ontology than other animals kept as pets. But then she meets another character called Liz, who asks about Rory, and thus reminds Lorelai about her feeling that she has failed Rory as a mother. And this fuels her kind of transferential desire to adopt Olenka in order to prove that she's capable of taking care of another being. So she immediately turns to the lady from the shelter saying, "I will take him," just like basically a customer would when deciding to buy something at a shop. In addition, she takes Olenka home without any trouble, even though the shelter workers have been informed about her history with pets. Now, this suggests, in my opinion, that the dog is treated as a commodity, as an object, not only by Lorelai within the diegesis, but also by the show itself, and that his role as an individual character, as a canine subject, is not important from the start. However, what I found really interesting in this show is that it is how open and self-reflexive about transforming the dog into a construct and using him as a source of comedy or drama, depending on where we are in the narrative. So, for example, in season 6, episode 8, Olenka starts acting really weird. He doesn't want to eat or walk. He seems to be suffering from some kind of melancholia. And Lorelai feels helpless, as she admits, which is already a hint at her transferring her feelings about Rory onto the dog. Ulanka also develops a new weird habit of collecting shoes from all around the house and arranging them in a line that lead to Rory's room, that Lorelai interprets as his attempts at trying to tell her something. And then we have the closing shot of the episode, which shows Ulanka lying on Rory's bed and Lorelai sitting in an armchair watching over him, just like one would do with a sick child, or for that matter, with a sick dog, as dog owners will. And Lorelai keeps stating things like not getting the message Ulanka was trying to tell her, and how she could have stepped in sooner or done something. And then she explicitly says that I'm a bad mother. So what here happens is that the show makes clear that Lorelai projects her feelings about being a bad mother to Rory onto the dog. Also, by using the dog as a stand-in for Rory, the episode basically downplays the dog's own sickness, his own experiences in a way. However, at the same time, the show doesn't hide this strategy. In fact, it reveals its cards, one could say, because it's open about using Ulanka's sickness as a way of illuminating Lorelai's feelings. And this might actually even call viewers' attention to see the real animal behind the construction. And of course, we might also feel sorry for the actual creature, not just for Lorelai, which includes a parallel between the emotional and physical states of the two of them. Another aspect that I would like to discuss is how Ulanka is used as a reflection of Lorelai, the people of Stars Hollow, and the show itself, because it is also clear that there is an analogy between Lorelai and the dog, which is another comic aspect. He's characterized as having a number of quirks. For example, he will not walk down the front steps of Lorelai's house without having something laid down on them first. He's afraid of peas, tissue holders, CDs, and framed pictures. He dislikes doctors, but apparently he loves women's shoes. And he has a mysterious talent for unlocking doors, just to name a few. So due to these strange preferences, he's rendered a quasi-human character, and he's repeatedly referred to as a hybrid. Now, obviously, this is to some extent an anthropomorphizing process of the dog, but it can also be interpreted as a self-reflexive comment on the part of the show, as how it blends basically human and canine qualities within the dog character, and so hybridizes anthropomorphic and non-anthropomorphic representation. Because yes, it's true that Ulanka in this way becomes a reflection of Lorelai's own strange habits, like her excessive consumption of coffee or her refusal to eat anything healthy. And he also becomes in this way the mascot of all the quirky residents of Stars Hollow, and also the symbol of the show's own quirkiness. But it's also true that dogs have their own strange habits and quirks. So this is not entirely a kind of projection of human qualities onto the dog. So Ulanka appears as an individual canine subject as well, even if his quirks are used as symbolical projections and serve the role of comic entertainment. And again, the show is self-reflexive about using the dog's quirkiness as a reflection of the human character's identity and of the show's cultural embediedness, respectively. Another aspect which is quite problematic in my opinion is how the show portrays the dog as a prop. And this is most prevalent after Lorelai and Rory mend their relationship and once again become the iconic loving mother-daughter duo, because Ulanka's role is now seriously reduced, and when he occasionally appears, his function is merely that of a prop. For example, at a winter carnival scene, he appears as the amazing doggy Swami, a fortune teller dressed in an Indian costume and trained to predict the future. So here what we see is how the dog is reduced to a spectacle, not only within the diegesis, but also by the show. As Malamud argues, the animal is a prop, and the sideshow star is completely unaware of how funny he is, and that makes it even funnier. He's at the same time the center of visual attention and wholly absent. But the scene is again self-reflexive about its obliteration of the actual dog through spectacularization, because Lorelai and Rory lure the visitors to their booth by shouting phrases like, "Nothing is a better distraction than a dog in a turban telling fortunes." Also, it's a cliche for a reason. And before the carnival, Lorelai explains the idea to Kirk, another quirky character in the show, who has doubts about a dog being a fortune teller, saying that it's all fake. My dog cannot predict the future. "So you admit it?" asks Kirk. "I was never hiding it." So Lorelai's last statement here summarizes the whole show's approach, which basically admits that it doesn't want to hide, that it uses the dog as a prop and as a source of comic or dramatic appeal. The episode that kind of epitomizes the show's self-reflexivity about transforming the real dog into a construct is the episode ironically titled "The Real Anka," which starts with a surreal dream sequence, including Lorelai, the singer Anka, who makes a cameo appearance in this episode, and the dog actor and the character Anka. In this scene, Lorelai imagines or dreams that the real Anka is doing things like the dog Anka would do, such as going on a walk with her or sitting on people's laps. And he constantly switches or transforms into the dog Anka, doing things that a dog would do. For example, running after a cat, but also appearing sometimes as a singer, crooning some oldies on a stage. And then the two of them meet in the same frame. And so the comic effect of naming the dog Anka comes to full force. And in this sense, the scene again undermines Anka's role as an actual dog by enmeshing his character with his human namesake. However, this scene also comically or self-reflexively juxtaposes the actual dog and its fictional construct, revealing how the actual dog is used as a cultural reference. So in order to conclude, Anka is at once a substitute child, a cultural reference, a symbol of quirkiness, and a prop in the show. And he's also virtually absent from the beginning of season 7 because, well, his former functions are no longer important, basically. And this suggests that the real Anka is absent in the show. Even when he's present, he doesn't appear as himself. His subjective experiences are undermined, except for his quirkiness, but that also serves as a symbol and a tool for entertainment. However, because of the self-reflexivity, playfulness of the show, its awareness of being embedded in popular culture, it cannot be seen as a mindless obliteration of the actual creature. In fact, it makes explicit comments, as I try to illustrate during this presentation, on how it creates fake, illusory images of the real creature. And in this sense, it might evoke self-reflexivity in the viewers too, when they are watching similar TV shows featuring dogs as human substitutes and props. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I didn't run over time, so yeah.
Thank you, Díaz. No, you definitely, well, we have a lot of time, so that was no problem at all. Did it perfectly well. Okay, great, thank you to both of you. So now I guess we can start with the Q&A session. If anyone has any questions or comments to any of our speakers, you already know this, but you can use the raise your hand button here on Zoom. Otherwise, you can write on the chat and I will read it aloud. Is there any comments from anyone in the audience? Oh, okay, you have a question again. Go ahead, please.
Sorry.
No,
basically, it's not a question, maybe just a comment or recommendation to Karli, right? I don't know if you are familiar with this term, strange kinship by Merleau-Ponty.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay. Have you heard about it?
Yes, I have, yes.
Okay, great. So maybe, I don't know if you are using it as well, but maybe could you comment on how or what's your opinion about that concept, because it basically approaches or gives a different approach from yours, maybe because it approaches the human canine relationship not from this kind of wholly transcendental or spiritual aspect, but through bodily kind of experiences. So I would be really interested, because I'm mostly interested in the phenomenological aspects of the human canine relationship.
Yeah, so from a digital culture point of view, I have to say, taking this transcendental approach is very different to me as well. So it does, I do feel like, especially with the dog relation, embodiment is very important. I mean, we do share physical space with them, we share our bodies with them. So it's a new way of thinking, which is why I added as sort of a layer to thinking, because I think there's some potential that can come from it. But I do agree, and I think this phenomenological relation of thinking of it from our body perspective is important. It's also something that clearly comes through in Haraway's work on the companion species. Interestingly, in dogs, I mean, you could elaborate on that show for years, but it's interesting because they do also emphasize that touch and the materiality. The camera work is close-up of the dogs, but also close-ups of human touching dog. I mean, you saw just the posters, the two paws, or the human hand and the paw. So it is an interesting one. I think probably potential for this idea is to perhaps end up comparing the kinship and the transcendental, sensible, transcendent relationship, and seeing potentials that you can get from both of them. I haven't studied it in depth, so I don't want to say too much and make an error or say something out of context, but that is, I highly agree that it is. And that's also a risk. That's why I think this is such a nice platform to share these ideas, but it has to be seen in the broader context of different ways of looking at being with animals.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe incorporating or kind of combining the two approaches would be great. Actually, I think Annette Pick does that in her book Creaturely Poetics, because she also talks about the transcendental kind of implications of bodily interconnectedness. Yeah.
That idea of being immanent, and through that immanence actually reaching transcendence. Which is super interesting. If I may, I don't know if anyone else has a question, but I wanted to ask you a question about, you mentioned that Gilmore Girls has been analyzed in terms of gender, and I was wondering how Paul Anka plays into the gender of and the critique on the gender and the feminism that comes through and doesn't come through in Gilmore Girls, and why does Lorelai choose Paul Anka, a male dog, and how does that play into the very girly household that they try to run?
Yeah, that's a very, I was kind of thinking about this, but I just couldn't get to the point of kind of discussing it in the presentation, but it's definitely something to explore. Actually, I don't know, I haven't read any, actually there is so little about Paul Anka the dog, and also the dog actor, and why he was chosen. He was basically just a concept for the director, and he had this idea that Paul Anka would be a pop cultural reference that Lorelai would appreciate. And I think that maybe because of that, so that was first the name that Daniel Palladino decided on, Paul Anka, and well, that I think kind of preconditioned or the naming of the dog, and therefore the gendering of the dog as a male dog. Maybe that is the only reason behind that. But thank you. That's a very interesting and important question.
Okay, and I know we have another question someone wrote in the chat. Okay, so please go ahead and ask your questions for our speakers.
Oh, hi. It's for me then. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Hi, well, thanks to both of you for your fascinating presentations. You both brought kind of different perspectives to the treatment of the canine in these different media. And I just want to start with Karli, I guess. Was interested in what you had to say about the representation of dogs and freedom on screen, right? Especially in the natural setting, and how some of these individuals allowed their dogs to roam. And you did see the I did see the image of the dogs on leash when somebody was hiking. And so I'm just wondering where to go with this. If you had anything more to add. This is more of a comment maybe than a question. Just the notion how even in documentary, of course, the dog is constrained within the frame, right? There are choices made in the selection of how these animals are represented, right? So freedom is not entirely achievable that way, but also in the context of the natural setting and the way people see animals, there's a tendency to think, oh, if dogs are off leash, roaming free, that's kind of the ideal way for the dog to experience its dogginess. But what about the relationship between the dog and other animal species in that natural environment? I mean, here in northern British Columbia and in Canada, people are told to be careful around wildlife, don't allow the dog to harass a wildlife. So I'm just wondering if you had any other reflections on either the cinematography aspects or on, how the dogs are interacting with other creatures, and whether that context changes the way we look at freedom.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. So interestingly, in the animal compassion essay, where Irigaray is talking, she uses the term, she's saying we need to give them freedom and let them be. She also refers to how she used to dress up her bunnies and, restrict their freedom. So she does acknowledge this idea, I guess, that we do tend to restrict that freedom. And I think because it's the human-dog relation in dogs that's being represented, you see the freedom. I guess you also see it in the context of they are our pets and they are our companion species, because they will always be a part of us. I mean, dogs are just that natural first thing you go to as the man's partner, So I guess I would probably describe it as the most freedom I've seen on television in terms of human and dog. And it is, yes, he hikes with his dogs on leashes. Some of them don't though, which is what I found striking, is like how Ice, he doesn't have a collar, he doesn't have a leash. He only has a little jacket for his own safety when he goes fishing, which I found really striking, because that is the first time I've actually seen that so prominently represented on screen. And then obviously the Costa Rica images of the dogs running wild, which actually resembles like a wildlife documentary top shot of a natural park of the animals roaming free. But yes, I guess they can never truly be free if we're capturing them on screen. So that is an interesting way to look at it. However, I think they're trying, and they're reaching for it, and they're trying to showcase just a little bit of letting them be themselves within our world.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's obviously always problematic, especially in an urban setting, having dogs running free, but these are visually and within the medium, interesting to see how you've seen that extra latitude. I do have a question for Borbála, if I may, or does somebody else want to jump in?
No, go ahead. I think we don't have any raised hands right now, so please just go ahead.
Okay. Great. So thank you for that answer, Karli. And also in the Gilmore girls presentation, I was interested in what you had to say about the sort of the self-reflexivity and how people, viewers might think about how other dogs are represented on screen. And then you made a reference, but early on you made a reference to, I forgot which character was it, Lorelai, talking about the dog being a shaggy dog, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with the films, The Shaggy Dog. Have you heard about these films? I'm wondering if that is a reference to this other cultural phenomenon, film phenomenon. And then there's a whole other issue of shaggy dogs and breed representation, and sort of accuracy, whether that matters for how TV and film uses a dog and mistakes the breed deliberately, for the audience. But yeah, first of all, have you heard of the Shaggy Dog movies at all, or could that be a reference to this wider cultural phenomenon?
That's a great idea. I think it might be, yeah. I have heard about the Shaggy Dog films, but I haven't seen them. I'm not sure whether they are British or American, but I think American. But the quick search will tell me, I think.
Yeah, there are two. I mean, there's original and then there's a remake. And so, yeah, I think because you were talking about the whole interconnectedness, the self-referentiality, I'm wondering that may well have been a good example that would reinforce what you're saying, about the dog in your.
Yeah. It's also a reference on how this kind of shagginess that you have mentioned, I think is misleading in a way, or it directs your kind of perceptions into a certain direction. So shagginess, I hope that I'm correct. It refers to stray dogs usually. This kind of that is shabbiness. Okay, sorry then. Kind of confusing two terms, but
I think you mentioned the cuteness factor too, right? That's something that is associated within screen representations. But I did find some weird trivial fact here, or not trivial, but examples of trivia about how in the Shaggy Dog films, in one of them, I can't remember which one, the dog is called a Bratislavian sheepdog, and which apparently is a breed that doesn't exist. I'd have to research that further to see if it's the case, but I know a lot about dog breeds and I've never come across that particular breed. So the fictionalization of a breed, for those kind of fantastic genres, because it's about, how a man transforms into a dog, right? So that shows how people take liberties with the actual dog, which may have been a different breed, like an actual Old English sheepdog or a bearded collie in the other version of the film. But I don't know, it's just it shows to me again how either people don't take the audience seriously. I think we could put any dog on screen and call it this breed, even if it isn't, but how malleable the dog is.
It like kind of treated as plasticine, this kind of matter that you can shape. And I think that these clay figures used by stop claymation movies are so wonderful examples because of that, because they kind of in their bodies they show how cultural representations shape the dog's body and kind of whole being for their own purposes. So
that's a nice parallel, the claymation aspect. Thanks, thank you both, great papers.
Okay, great, thank you for your questions. Any more questions from the audience? We still have a few minutes, so if there's anyone else who wants to ask a question or any comments, you can either raise your hand or write in the chat. I'm going to take this a look. Okay, so while we wait to see if we have any more questions. So taking the cue from something which I don't remember exactly the whole sentence, but Karli uses something that okay, that the Netflix show focuses more on depicting rather than enforcing. Well, since we are talking, because, well, our panel is all about dogs. So, and we have two very different representations of dogs in this case. So we have documentary and then a TV show, which is, well, pretty famous for many reasons, Gilmore Girls. So do you, both of you, I would guess that I can ask both of you this question. Do you think that then, in order not to do that, to really depict and not to enforce a certain perspective, a certain view on animals, a documentary is the closest we can get to that? Can we try to achieve that in any other genre, or like, what do you what is your take on that? What do you think about that? This is just more like me talking, thinking out loud, really. But
yeah, so the documentary comes with the history of documentary films on animals, comes with a whole set of problems as well. So I know there's also moves away from it to rather depict something in a different way. I think what I would say we could take from this documentary is it's a bit more of a different take on a documentary, because it's stories. It's not the camera objectively following. It is very subjective. So I would say there are things in this documentary, especially things to do with the medium and the way that they've made the documentary, that we can take from that and we can apply it to other documentaries, also to fiction and to other genres. So for instance, the camera work, the way that there's the subtle things, but the human and the dog are never actually, they always level with each other. Even in some of the clips you saw, the humans bend down. It's just subtle things that they do. It's really not deliberate, and you have to go looking for it. But there's ways to give that animal more agency. And then, yeah, I think also just the value of the human just telling their story. And through that, the animal's importance and the value they add comes out. I think it was also mentioned in a paper yesterday. I can't recall now, but someone said that there's actually no need for us to try and see it through the animal's point of view. We just need to listen. There's so much accounts of it. We need to listen to what humans are saying. They were talking about the passing and those ideas. So obviously we do need to see the animal's perspective. We do need to step away from the human at some point. But there's value in telling human stories still, which is important. I think taking ideas from Netflix's dogs, I mean, it's not innocent at all, but taking some of the good ideas that they have and then using that to go forward. It doesn't have to be strictly documentary, no.
Okay, great, thanks. I don't know if you, yeah, please go
ahead.
Completely.
I completely agree with what Karli said. So I don't think that, either documentary or kind of fiction is, better in this regard or more useful. And actually, I think studying the two forms of cinema together might really be productive, because if you study them together, you will see maybe that, even documentaries will construct animals in certain ways and project ideas in them and so on. Even those very kind of animal conscious or animal centered documentaries that are now very kind of or becoming more widespread or popular. For example, Stray, which is a film portraying dogs in Istanbul, or Los Reyes, which is I think a Chilean or was made in Peru, but it's very similar, or the Truffle Hunters. So they are all kind of trying to give an insight into the dogs' lives in urban spaces. without trying to imitate their perspective. And yet they also kind of project certain ideas on them and create characters of them. This is why they treat their kind of subjects also as main characters. So dogs with more charisma will become, for example, main characters, just like in fiction. But then this is obviously kind of setting up a hierarchy between certain dogs based on, human expectations and intentions. And at the same time, fiction films can be, as I try to demonstrate, very playful and self-reflexive about their own ways of kind of, and other productions ways of constructing animals as certain values and value concepts and spectacles and such. So and they might also evoke empathy through anthropomorphism even. So studying the two forms together could be productive, I think.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you to both of you. And we actually have a question here on chat, so I'm going to read it. So this one is for Karli. Okay, the final tweet you showed proclaimed that this show is wholesome. The warm, positive feelings are undeniable, but at the core, these are domesticated dogs. You said it even in your presentation, referring to the human as an owner. Although there is debate over the domestic relationship between humans and dogs, and if there was at one point a canine choice in being domesticated, but undeniably dogs are considered property now. So is there also a sinister aspect to this show that is in some ways reifying the idea that dogs are for human wholesome feelings? Okay, don't worry about not being on camera, but that's okay. Do you have the question? Because since it's a long one, you can look at it on chat.
Yeah. Yes. I can just answer. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think it is a very valid point. I can just, from my own personal experience of watching the show and speaking to others about the show, say that I've never actually felt someone think of it as sinister. However, I do think you have a point, because it does reinforce this domesticated idea that relationship that they depict is what we use dogs for. However, it does make you think, our animals on screen, they're not allowed to make us feel anything. The show is very emotional, and it does also now make me think if maybe the viewer watching it becomes quite emotional, not only because they think, dog relationship, so special, magical quality. Maybe it is also because we realize that we've made these animals completely reliant on our beings. So maybe that is a part of the emotion you feel, the wholesomeness then that a lot of people respond to. I do think the show also has a lot of value in showing that domestication process, perhaps different takes on it through the different episodes. It's quite diverse, the different types of people, the global context that they show. But yes, I think that is an interesting comment. I'll definitely take it on board. Yeah, it might help also explain the extremely emotional responses that viewers have to the show. Yeah.
Great, Karli, thank you. And thank you, Samantha, for your question. Of course, don't worry about it. Any more questions? We have a couple of minutes left. If there are any more last minute questions or comments. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the chat just in case. I think there are no more raised hands. No. Okay. Yeah, you can see we are getting some some comments. Okay, so Samantha, okay, another question. So to keep following that one. So the filmography of the show must also play a role in the emotionality. Is that right? Karli, what do you say?
Yes, no, 100%. Yeah, and another thing that also touches on that is perhaps not the filmography, but something the show does is it incorporates a lot of social media. So showcasing, maybe commenting on the way that animals have become part of the social media world, perhaps not to such a positive extent, but the whole show incorporates that media aspect, which I think is also very important. It's like they're almost also commenting about media in the show. So yeah, how technology comes into play there, and then also how films come into play there as well. So yes, I think that is important, definitely.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Karen, for your comments too about the documentary. That should be interesting, of course. Yeah, it's true that documentary or documentary films, yeah, it's becoming more creative, absolutely. So if there are no more questions, I think we can just wrap it up because it's more or less time. And thank you to, well, of course, to our presenters, first of all, here today. And to both of you, thank you for your wonderful presentations, and thank you to all for coming and connecting to this wonderful panel. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. We still have a couple of activities left on this last day of our conference, which I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you, Karli. Thank you, Borbála. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day, evening, morning, wherever you are.